They called him off with an hour to spare. King Charles cancelled the Prime Minister's audience at the palace with 60 minutes' notice, and the shockwave was immediate. Motorcade on the Mall. Blue lights. Then an emergency U-turn as tourists filmed the humiliation of a sitting Prime Minister. Within the hour, officials and aides were whispering the same phrase. Constitutional crisis, palace sources say. The message landed while Keir Starmer was already in transit. The optics were brutal. The substance was worse. At 9:47 a.m, Buckingham Palace issued a line so cold it could frost the brass on the gates. His Majesty would postpone the audience indefinitely. No alternative date, no explanation. 29 words to detonate a centuries-old convention. The timing was surgical. Weekly audiences are sacrosanct. They've endured war, recession and government collapses. Not Churchill, not Thatcher, not Blair. None of them were ever told to turn back. For Charles to break the rhythm of the Constitution signals a rupture between Crown and government that cannot be shrugged off as diary management. Something fundamental has snapped. Inside Downing Street, order collapsed into panic. Ministers jogging through corridors, pages buzzing, emergency meetings with no agenda because no one knew where to begin. The press secretary stepped to the microphones with her hands trembling. The Prime Minister respects His Majesty's decision. She couldn't finish the line with conviction and fled the podium. That was the tell. Number 10 knew it was out over the edge. What happened next turned drama into danger. Multiple insiders described the Prime Minister returning from the aborted palace trip incandescent. He raged that the King had no right to do it, that the Crown was abusing its position. The King works for Parliament, he snapped, not against it. Colleagues tried to calm him. The Deputy Prime Minister urged restraint. Starmer rounded on the room. "You're all weak," he said, as ministers exchanged glances that said everything without a word. This wasn't leadership. This was a crack in the hull. And then the escalation. At 3:15 p.m, behind a closed door in the Prime Minister's private study, a second meeting. Fewer people, higher stakes. Sources present describe it as the most chilling strategy session of this government. Lawyers were summoned. Options were canvassed. Could the Crown's actions be challenged in court? Could Number 10 seek judicial review of a monarch's decision to deny an audience? In plain English, a sitting Prime Minister weighing legal action against the sovereign. Consider the implications. Britain's unwritten constitution runs on convention and restraint. The monarch's reserve roles are bounded by custom, not statute. To drag that into a courtroom doesn't just bend the rules, it risks tearing the fabric that holds the system together. The mere discussion confirms how far this crisis has travelled in a single day and how rattled the centre of government has become. Meanwhile, the country watches and asks a simpler question. If ministers can find time for constitutional warfare, why can't they find money for those who wore the uniform? The veterans' stories are piling up like files no one wants to open. Michael Patterson, Royal Marine, Portsmouth, 72. 14 months for a hip replacement after decades of service that included the Falklands. He hobbles to the shops with a stick he bought himself. "I saluted the flag," he said through tears. "Now I can't get basic care while they argue about politics." He is not alone. 180,000 veterans on waiting lists. Men and women who stood guard in Northern Ireland, convoyed the roads of Basra and came home with bodies and minds that need help. Now they are told to wait and wait and wait again. While they wait, the people elected to run the country do not wait for anything. Ministers enjoy private cover worth 5 figures a year. Dentistry, physio, mental health sessions, prescriptions, paid by taxpayers who cannot access the same speed or certainty. It is the contrast, not just the cost, that corrodes trust. This is where anger hardens into something more permanent. You can forgive error. You can forgive misfortune. You cannot forgive a government that appears to look after itself while those who served are left at the back of the queue. Lifelong Labour voters are saying so out loud. Phone-ins full of rough voices saying they never thought they'd feel this way. But they do. Because the numbers are real and the delays are real and the pain is real. Then a detail lands that turns anger into accusation. Last Tuesday, 5 days before the palace shut its door, ministers quietly knocked back a cross-party plan to boost veterans' care by 340 million. Conservatives, Lib Dems and Labour backbenchers aligned to clear mental health backlogs and fast-track surgery for service-related injuries. It would have cut waiting lists, it would have saved lives. The Health Secretary said no. Budgets, priorities, the usual words, but they do not land the way they used to, because in the very same week, Parliament signed off 180 million for a Whitehall-wide diversity and inclusion programme. Read that again. No money to clear the backlog for men and women who carried the flag into harm's way. Yet 9 figures approved for bureaucracy that produces paperwork, workshops and PowerPoint. Ministers can argue the merits, they can explain the line items. They cannot explain why veterans must keep waiting while central government funds its own seminars. That is the moment when the anger in the country finds a focal point, when the images of a turned-around motorcade and a cancelled audience meet the reality of a cancelled operation and a cancelled counselling session. People understand the crisis in their bones. It is not an abstraction about monarchs and ministers. It is about duty. Who honours it, who breaks it, and who pays when it is betrayed. In Leeds, a widow spoke for thousands. Her husband served 22 years, survived ambushes and IEDs. He did not survive the 11-month wait for PTSD treatment. She stood on a makeshift platform and whispered a sentence that cut through the day like a blade. He lived through Afghanistan. He couldn't live through the queue. The crowd went silent. MPs present cried. Then the phones came out. The clip travelled across the country in minutes. This is what consequence looks like beyond Westminster. And while all this builds, the pressure at the palace is building too. The king has kept his counsel for 70 years of precedent. He has held the line his late mother drew in steel. Neutrality in deed and tone. But this is different. He has heard the tape. He has seen the briefings. He has felt the sting of being treated as a prop by the very people who asked to borrow the credibility of the crown. Palace aides say His Majesty is furious, not for himself alone, but for the institution and the legacy it carries. Everyone is waiting for the next move. Will the palace speak again? Will Downing Street double down? Will the legal gambit see daylight? The markets are sniffing risk. The public is choosing sides. And on the horizon, a moment approaches that will either cool this fire or turn it into an inferno. The king broke 70 years of royal silence with a move no one saw coming. Cameras rolling, millions watching, and His Majesty standing at the cenotaph, not as a silent figurehead, but as a man ready to draw a line in the sand. His words were clear, deliberate, loaded. "We honour those who served," he said, voice trembling with controlled fury. Those who believed Britain meant something beyond politics and power plays. Then came the pause, the look towards the minister's stand, and the final hammer blow. Duty to nation must always transcend personal ambition. The crowd understood. The country understood. Even those ministers shifting uneasily in their suits understood. The king had just rebuked his own prime minister on live television. Constitutional scholars were stunned. Professor James Norton of Cambridge called it the most politically charged intervention by a monarch since George VI in wartime. The monarch is meant to symbolise continuity, not confrontation. But insiders say Charles felt he had no choice. The leaked recording from Chequers, Starmer calling the monarchy a relic, had cut deep. Not just into the king's pride, but into the very legacy of his late mother. One palace aide said, His Majesty feels betrayed. He gave them trust and neutrality, and they mocked him for it behind closed doors. The visual contrast told its own story. The king, calm, measured, resolute. The Prime Minister, red-faced, jaw clenched, eyes burning. Witnesses said the tension between them could be felt through the television screen, and the British public didn't miss a beat. Within hours, #DefendOurKing was the top trend worldwide. TikTok flooded with clips comparing Charles's dignity to Starmer's disdain. A single video of veteran Michael Patterson watching the King's speech and tears in his eyes hit 15 million views. The king remembers us, he said softly, but our government forgot. And then came the polls. A collapse so severe it made the Brexit referendum look calm. Labour's support free fell from 38% to 23% in 72 hours. Among voters over 60, the monarchy's most loyal defenders, the disapproval rate for Starmer hit 84%. Entire Labour heartlands were crumbling. Durham down 19 points, Liverpool down 22, Newcastle down 17. Seats held for generations evaporating overnight. The economic tremors followed fast. The pound sank over 3%. The FTSE shed 340 points. 47 billion wiped from Britain's markets in one trading day. Investors hate instability, and this, a Prime Minister at war with the Crown, is instability in its purest form. Traders dumped bonds. Analysts warned of a confidence crisis not seen since Black Wednesday. Even the tourism sector began to hemorrhage bookings as the world decided Britain wasn't the backdrop for calm holidays anymore. But the shock didn't stop at home. The humiliation went global. At the G20 summit in Brussels, Starmer found himself alone at the photo op. Macron walked past without a glance. Germany's Chancellor turned away mid-approach. Trudeau managed a handshake so brief it was practically symbolic. Cameras caught it all. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom shunned like a pariah. A diplomat described it as an unspoken sanction. Leaders were sending a message. Britain's government had lost its sense of constitutional restraint. Foreign policy experts say the damage to Britain's soft power could last a generation. Dr. Amanda Foster from the London School of Economics warned, "Our influence depends on stability, tradition and respect for our institutions. Starmer has shattered that perception. International partners now see a divided country, unsure of its own rules, led by a man at war with his monarch." Inside Westminster, the rebellion became open revolt. WhatsApp groups of MPs filled with talk of leadership challenges, messages flying under names like Future Forward and New Direction. "This isn't damage control anymore," one cabinet minister was overheard saying. "This is survival." That survival looks less likely by the hour. Late last night, Transport Secretary Louise Haigh resigned. Her statement, posted at 11:34 p.m, hit like a thunderclap. "I cannot serve a Prime Minister who shows contempt for the institutions millions of Britons hold sacred." Within 3 hours, 3 more junior ministers followed. Each resignation letter echoed the same moral line. Verified. Time thread is crossed into unforgivable territory. Even his loyal Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has gone silent. No interviews, no appearances, no defence. Insiders say she's quietly building her own campaign team. Angela Rayner isn't defending him either. Once his fiercest ally, now she's meeting backbenchers, reassuring rebels, positioning herself as the calm hand Labour needs when the inevitable comes. Her allies are briefing journalists that she embodies Labour values without the chaos. Diane Abbott, a party veteran who's seen every era of Labour self-destruction, gave the bluntest verdict yet. "This isn't a political mistake, it's political suicide." And then, as if the fire needed more fuel, the Telegraph dropped another leak, one that could finish Starmer completely. Documents from Labour's own strategy team, a briefing memo outlining plans to gauge donor reaction to repositioning the monarchy as ceremonial only. In plain English, they were testing appetite for cutting royal influence behind closed doors, without Parliament, without debate, without the people's consent. If that memo is authentic, and insiders say it is, then Starmer wasn't caught in an offhand comment. He was executing a deliberate plan to reshape the constitution through secret conversations with donors, not reform, not debate, conspiracy. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom accused of scheming to diminish the Crown's role in silence. The timing could not be worse. His authority is disintegrating, his cabinet fracturing, his party on the brink of rebellion. And outside in towns and cities across Britain, the people are already making up their minds. The King stands for duty. Starmer stands accused of betrayal. The battle lines of modern Britain are being redrawn. And one man is waiting to seize the moment. Nigel Farage saw the opening like a general reading the field. While Downing Street drowned in scandal, he stepped into the spotlight in Birmingham, Reform UK banners behind him, the air thick with defiance. While others insult our king, we defend him, he thundered. While others mock our traditions, we protect them. While others put ideology over identity, Reform UK puts Britain first. The applause was volcanic, flags waved, phones filmed. A politician once dismissed as a protest figure now looked every inch a man auditioning for high office. Reform UK's membership exploded overnight, up 340% since the crisis began. Donations flooded in, millions of pounds from small donors who'd had enough of Westminster's contempt. The party's polling numbers rocketed to 26%, level with Labour, snapping at the Conservatives' heels. Britain, for the first time in living memory, stood on the edge of a three-way political earthquake. One fuelled by fury, loyalty and a longing for leadership that still believes in Britain itself. In Parliament, the atmosphere is combustible. Senior MPs speak in whispers now, not about policy, but about survival. The 1922 committee, the Conservative backbench power bloc, has convened emergency meetings, preparing for potential coalitions if Labour collapses. Across the aisle, Labour's National Executive Committee has called a dawn crisis session for Monday. They know the clock is ticking. But the most alarming whispers aren't coming from the parties, they're coming from the palace. Sources close to the Crown say King Charles has privately consulted constitutional experts about the scope of his reserve powers. Powers that have not been touched since the 1970s, and some not since the days of George V. The rumours swirl. Could the King, if he judged the government to have breached constitutional convention, dismiss his own Prime Minister? The palace, of course, denies any talk of abdication or dismissal, yet the denials sound rehearsed. Courtiers are nervous. The monarchy was built on restraint, but restraint cuts both ways when a prime minister mocks the institution, when he challenges it in law, when he turns the public against the crown. Restraint begins to look like weakness. Britain's constitutional order, at once unshakable, now feels like glass underfoot. The market sense it, the public feels it, Westminster knows it. Keir Starmer, the man who came to power promising integrity and order, now stands accused of treachery against the very institution that defines Britain's continuity. His authority crumbles, his allies scatter, and his enemies, both foreign and domestic, smell blood in the water. Inside Downing Street, the mood is grim. Advisors are working by candlelight, metaphorically, trying to salvage what's left of a collapsing government. Rumours of resignation letters drafted but not delivered. Ministers avoiding television cameras, the press corps camped outside number 10, waiting for a glimpse of motion behind those black doors. Every hour brings another defection, another leak. Another humiliation. In the palace, the King's schedule remains blank. No audiences, no briefings, just silence. But it's the kind of silence that shakes empires in the silence before a storm. As the weekend dawns, Britain stands at the edge of something historic. A confrontation not just between a monarch and a prime minister, but between two visions of the nation itself. One built on duty, service and continuity. The other built on power, ego and political calculation. In pubs, living rooms and online forums, the question is the same. Can Starmer survive the weekend, or has King Charles, with 29 words and a single act of royal defiance, just ended a prime minister's career? Because if the leaks are true, if the palace's next move is as bold as insiders whisper, then we are not watching ordinary politics anymore. We are watching the unravelling of modern British history live, minute by minute. And somewhere in that stillness between the fall of one government and the rise of another, the man once dismissed as a sideshow, Nigel Farage, is smiling.